Before going to bed, I overheard a strange conversation between my daughter-in-law and my son. A conversation spoken in low voices behind the living room wall as if I were already too old, too slow, and too useless to hear the words that were being used to divide up what remained of my life. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the nursing home, Ava said, with a coldness so clean it did not sound like anger at all. It sounded like planning. It sounded like paperwork. It sounded like a decision that had been made long before I was ever supposed to learn about it. I stood in the hallway in my slippers, one hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. And for a moment I could not move, not because my body had failed me, not because I was the confused old man she had already begun describing to strangers, but because some betrayals are so precise they do not wound at first. They freeze you. They turn the blood in your chest into something heavy and dark. I heard my son Leonard ask if the timing was right, not if the decision was cruel, not if his father deserved to be told the truth, not if the man who had raised him alone after his mother died should be treated like a human being before being packed away. But only if Thanksgiving was too soon, if I might ask questions, if there would be complications. Ava laughed then, softly, almost beautifully, and that small laugh did more damage than shouting ever could have done, because there was no strain in it, no guilt, no fear of God or family or memory. "What is he going to do, Leonard?" she said. "He is completely dependent on us. My name is Edward Harlan, and I am 67 years old. For 43 years I worked at the steel mill outside town, first as a floor hand, then as a line supervisor, then as a shift foreman responsible for 30 men who could lose fingers, lungs, marriages, and lives if someone in charge was careless for even a moment. I learned there that danger rarely announces itself with drama. It comes in the small change in the sound of a belt, the slight vibration under a platform, the way a young worker looks too confident near a machine that does not forgive confidence. I carried that knowledge into old age, though I did not realize I would need it in my own son's house. 2 years before that night, my wife Martha died of cancer after a long illness that left the house we had rented together too quiet to bear. Leonard told me I should move in with him and Ava for a while, just until I felt steadier, just until the grief stopped making every room feel like an accusation. Ava had smiled when he said it. She had taken both of my hands in hers and said, "Edward, family takes care of family." I had believed her because I needed to believe someone. Grief makes fools of people not because they become stupid, but because loneliness teaches them to accept warmth without examining its source. The house on Hawthorne Lane was a 2-story colonial with black shutters, a deep front porch, and a kitchen large enough for holiday meals that never quite felt like holidays. I had helped them buy it, $25,000, nearly every dollar Martha and I had saved after a lifetime of careful living, went into the down payment when Leonard called me in a voice full of embarrassment and said the lender wanted more cash at closing. I remember standing in the bank with him, watching the teller count out the cashier's check, feeling an ache in my chest that was not regret but something close to pride. A father wants to believe his final useful act can become shelter for the people he loves. I told myself Martha would have wanted it. I told myself Leonard deserved stability after years of trying to find his footing. I told myself Ava's sharp edges were just ambition, that the way she inspected every favor for weakness was simply the habit of a woman who wanted a better life. I was wrong on all counts, but wrongness is rarely obvious while you are still paying for it. After I moved in, I tried not to be in the way. That became my private law. I woke early and stayed quiet. I showered before either of them needed the bathroom. I kept my pills lined neatly in a plastic organizer that I pushed to the back corner of the dresser, because Ava had once wrinkled her nose and said, "All those bottles make the room feel depressing." I cooked dinner 3 nights a week, washed the dishes afterward, swept the porch, trimmed the hedges, cleaned the gutters, repaired the downstairs toilet, adjusted the old furnace when it kicked and moaned in winter, and paid for groceries every other week from my pension because I did not want anyone, especially Ava, to think I was eating food I had not earned. Still, there were small moments. She would pause in the kitchen doorway and look at the sponge in my hand, not with gratitude, but with assessment, as if measuring whether the old man had done enough to justify the square footage he occupied. She would say, "Edward, you forgot to wipe the counters under the toaster," in a tone gentle enough that Leonard heard only correction, but I heard the deeper thing beneath. "You are tolerated here because you are useful. Do not forget it." I forgot it anyway, or maybe I pretended to forget, because the alternative was too painful. Since Martha's death, my mind had become skilled at making excuses for other people. When Ava moved my favorite chair from the living room to the den because it looked too worn for guests, I told myself she cared about the house. When she stopped inviting my old work friend Frank over because she said he made Leonard uncomfortable with all his mill stories, I told myself young people did not want to spend their evenings listening to old men talk about the past. When she suggested adding Leonard's name to my checking account for emergencies, I told myself it was practical, even though the pen felt strange in my fingers at the bank, even though the young woman behind the desk looked at me once directly, as if asking silently whether I was sure. I said yes. That was the tragedy of those years. I said yes too many times because yes sounded like love, and no sounded like loneliness. The night before Thanksgiving, I was not going down the hall to spy. I was going for warm milk, a ritual Martha had left behind like a thread tied between this life and the one before. Every night, almost at the same time, I would heat a cup of milk in the microwave, stir in a spoonful of honey, and stand at the kitchen counter while it cooled, remembering the way Martha used to touch the side of the mug with 2 fingers and say, "Not yet, Eddie, you'll burn your mouth," always smiling as if I were still the young man who rushed everything. That night the house was dark, except for a lamp in the living room. Rain tapped lightly against the windows. I remember the sound because afterward everything came back to me in fragments, and that sound became part of the moment. Soft rain over hard truth. I had reached the hallway bend when Ava said the sentence that stopped my life. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the facility. Not a facility, the facility. As if the place had already been chosen, toured, paid for, and folded into a plan where I was not a participant but an object to be moved. I leaned closer, my breath caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. Sunset Manor has an opening next week, Ava continued. I spoke to Melissa in admissions again this afternoon. She said if we bring him Monday morning, they can process him before lunch. I told her we want a clean transition, no drawn-out emotional thing. Leonard said, I just don't know if Monday is too soon. Too soon for who? Ava asked. For him or for your guilt? There was a silence. I knew my son's silences. I had raised him through them. When he was 16 and his mother died, he would sit at the kitchen table for hours, staring at his cereal, too proud to cry and too young to know what else to do with grief. I had learned to read the way his shoulders tightened, the way his right thumb rubbed the side of his index finger when he was afraid. In the living room that night I could not see him, but I heard him doing the same old thing with his voice, shrinking from confrontation while hoping someone else would decide for him. I don't feel good about lying to him, he said. We are not lying to him, Ava replied. We are making an adult decision. He is no longer capable of making rationally. He does not have dementia, Leonard said. And for one brief, terrible second, I loved him so much I nearly stepped into the room. There it was, the truth, spoken weakly but spoken. My son still knew I was not lost. My son still knew I was myself. Then Ava answered, and the love retreated back into its wound. Leonard, she said, slowly, the way a teacher might speak to a particularly disappointing student. Dementia does not always look like people in movies wandering into traffic. Your father repeats himself. He gets confused about dates. He leaves things around. He forgets conversations. He doesn't forget conversations, Leonard said. Not really. He forgot that I told him not to use the good serving platter for his sandwiches, Ava said. That is not dementia. It is decline, she said sharply, then softened her voice so quickly it was almost graceful. Honey, I know this is hard. I know you love him. I know he sacrificed for you. I respect that, but love does not mean letting an old man take over our house and drain our lives until we are exhausted and resentful. Do you want us to become bitter? Do you want our marriage to collapse? Because you are too guilty to make the decision every adult child eventually has to make. There it was, her true talent. She never pushed with one hand when she could use two, guilt and fear, tenderness and contempt. She could make cruelty sound like maturity. She could make selfishness sound like responsibility. I had heard her do it before in smaller ways. At dinner, when Leonard complained about money, she would say, I just want us to live like people who believe we deserve good things. When I said I could fix the old dishwasher instead of replacing it, she smiled and said, Edward, you have such a Depression-era mindset, and Leonard had laughed because she laughed first. She rarely commanded directly. She arranged the room until disagreement became embarrassing. I heard Leonard exhale. What about the money? What about it? His pension, his social security, the account, power of attorney, Ava said. Remember, once he is admitted and they confirm he needs full-time care, we can manage everything. The facility will take a portion, obviously, but the rest can support the house. It is not theft, Leonard. It is family money being used for family stability. My hand slipped against the wall. Family money. That phrase opened something inside me. I thought of the mill, of 30 years of heat and noise, of boots gone stiff with sweat and metal dust, of evenings when I came home so tired I had to sit in the car for 5 minutes before I could walk inside and be a father instead of a machine with a lunchbox. I thought of Martha rubbing ointment into my cracked hands. I thought of every canceled vacation, every second-hand coat, every envelope where we tucked away what little remained after bills because old age was coming, and we did not want to arrive empty-handed. Ava had translated all of that into family money. Not my history, not my labor, not Martha's sacrifice, just a revenue stream. Leonard said, Dad helped us with the down payment, $25,000. That was everything he had, and we are grateful, Ava said, almost impatient now. That is why we are placing him somewhere clean and professional. Sunset Manor is not some horror show. I looked at photos. They have a courtyard. They have activities. They have a piano in the common room. He hates piano music, Leonard murmured. That is not the point. No, I thought. The point was the guest room. The point was the pension. The point was the bathroom I used too slowly. The pills on the dresser. The old man's breathing through walls that were supposed to belong to them. I stood there listening while my life was reduced to logistic. Ava said she had already told Sunset Manor that I had early-stage dementia. She said she had mentioned confusion, grief-related decline, stubborn behavior, and episodes of agitation. Leonard protested, but only in the way a man protests after he has already decided not to stop anything. He asked if the staff would require a doctor's confirmation. Ava said I handled it. Dr. Pelham signed the assessment. I had never met Dr. Pelham. A coldness moved across my back that had nothing to do with the rain or the old hallway draft. A doctor I had never met had signed a paper saying I was mentally unfit. Someone had forged the shape of my decline and placed it into a file. Someone had taken the grief I carried for Martha and turned it into evidence against me. I wanted to step into that living room then. I wanted to demand the papers. I wanted to ask Leonard when exactly he had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as a problem Ava could solve. But my body did not move. This is what people do not understand about betrayal. The first response is not always anger. Sometimes it is obedience. Sometimes the mind, stunned by injury, behaves exactly as the people hurting you expect it to behave. Quiet, ashamed, half convinced it deserves the blow. When do we tell him? Leonard asked. We don't, Ava said. We wake up Monday morning. We pack his things. We say we are taking him for an evaluation. By the time he understands, he will already be there. Clean break, no drama. No long goodbye. No long goodbye. I thought of Martha's last week in hospice. How she held my hand and apologized for leaving even though she was the one dying. How I told her she had nothing to apologize for. How every goodbye was too short no matter how long the dying took. Ava was planning to deny me even the dignity of knowing, when my life was being divided into before and after. Monday morning, pack his things, drive him there, clean break. I backed away from the wall carefully because if I stayed one more second, I knew I would make a sound. The hallway seemed longer going back than it had coming down. My slippers whispered over the floorboard. At my bedroom door I paused, listening, terrified they had heard me, terrified they had not. Then I slipped inside and closed the door with the care of a thief. For a long time I stood in the dark, not turning on the lamp, not moving toward the bed. The room looked less like shelter than evidence. Martha's photograph on the nightstand, my work boots tucked under the chair, though I had not worn them for years, my flannel shirts hanging in half a closet, because Ava needed the other half for seasonal storage. My medications lined up beneath the framed prayer Martha's mother had embroidered. The room had always felt temporary, but now the temporariness had teeth. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. My chest hurt. My hands trembled. I told myself to calm down, the old supervisor's command voice rising from somewhere deep inside me. Assess the hazard. Identify the pressure point. Do not put your hands near the machine until you know what is moving. But there are machines made of people, and they are harder to read because they smile while grinding you down. I looked at Martha's photograph. She had been 59 in that picture, taken on our last anniversary before the diagnosis. Her hair pinned back, her eyes tired but laughing because I had dropped cake icing on my shirt and tried to pretend it was part of the pattern. I whispered her name once, not as a prayer exactly, but as a way of proving I was still connected to something true. For the first hour, I did nothing but remember. That is where the pain began to change. It moved backward. It did not stay in the hallway with Ava's voice. It reached into the past and recolored every scene. Leonard inviting me to move in was no longer a son's kindness, but the first step in isolation. Ava insisting I stop driving so much was no longer concern, but containment. The bank account, the doctor appointments, the way she corrected me in front of guests and then touched my shoulder afterward as if affection could erase humiliation. I remembered the afternoon she took me to see Dr. Leland, or at least I thought that was his name. She had answered most of his questions for me. He gets confused about bills sometimes, she said. He forgets whether he took his blood pressure medicine. He becomes agitated when corrected. I had laughed then, embarrassed, and said, I suppose grief makes a man scattered. The doctor nodded, without looking at me for long. Ava squeezed my wrist. It was not comfort. It was a warning. I did not sleep. Around midnight, Leonard and Ava went upstairs. I heard their bedroom door close. I heard water running, drawers opening. The ordinary sounds of people preparing for bed after deciding to erase a man. I sat still until the house settled. At 2, I stood and opened the small tin box where I kept old documents. My social security card, Martha's death certificate, the last birthday card she had written to me, and a folded copy of the deed paperwork from the house closing. I had not looked at it in years. My eyes were not as good as they once were, but the yellowed legal pages were clear enough. There was my name, Edward James Harlan. There was the recorded interest, not a gift, not a verbal promise, not a sentimental contribution, a legal ownership stake proportional to the down payment. Signed and notarized at closing. 37%. I had insisted at the time because Frank, who had seen 2 nephews cheat their mother out of a house, told me, Eddie, love your boy, but put your name on paper. I had felt guilty doing it. I had not told Leonard and Ava plainly, because I did not want them to think I mistrusted them. Now the document felt like a hand reaching out of the past to pull me back from the edge. At dawn, I began. The house was gray in the weak morning light, and the kitchen still smelled faintly of the lemon cleaner Ava used, because she said old houses smelled like old people if you were not careful. I made coffee, black, strong, the way I drank it during double shifts at the mill, and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I wrote 3 words at the top: evidence, money, exit. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. For a long time I stared at the words, and then another thought came, sharp and practical. Do not accuse until you can prove. It was the rule of every union hearing, every workplace investigation, every dangerous failure that required accountability. Feelings made noise. Documents moved consequences. I waited until I heard Ava's white noise machine still humming upstairs, then walked into Leonard's home office. That room had once been mine in practice, though never in name, because I had assembled the shelves, mounted the blinds, fixed the sticking window, and organized the filing cabinet when they moved in. Leonard was careless with papers, trusting Ava to remember what mattered and me to fix what broke. I opened the bottom drawer, where we had labeled family documents in blue marker. There it was, a folder marked Dad. Not Edward, not Father. Dad written in Ava's neat hand with a little underline beneath it, as if I were an administrative category. Inside, I found the first version of my disappearance. Power of attorney forms bearing my signature, or something made to resemble it. I stared at the slanted E, the too perfect curve of the H, the way the line pressure did not match mine. I had signed many documents in my life, enough contracts and work orders and insurance forms to know my own hand. This signature had been copied, not written. Beneath, that was a cognitive assessment from Dr. Stephen Pelham, describing me as disoriented, forgetful, resistant to care, emotionally volatile due to unresolved bereavement, and likely to require supervised residential placement within the immediate future. The phrase immediate future sat on the page like a sentence. I turned the paper over. No notes, no test scores, no evidence I had ever been examined, just a signature and the polished language of professional betrayal. Then came Sunset Manor, intake packet, deposit receipt, room availability, medication management authorization, emergency, behavioral intervention consent. My name printed again and again in forms I had never seen. My life preloaded into their system like a package waiting for delivery. One section asked about agitation triggers. Ava had written mention of deceased wife, refusal to surrender personal belongings, accusations that family is stealing from him. I had to sit down in Leonard's office chair because my knees weakened beneath me. They had anticipated my grief. They had anticipated my resistance. They had planned to make truth sound like a symptom. I photographed everything, page after page. My hands shook so badly at first that the pictures blurred, and I had to stop, breathe, and begin again. Martha's voice came back to me, bright and teasing. From the day she gave me the smartphone for my 65th birthday. You never know when you might need proof of something, Eddie. I smiled then despite myself. But it was a terrible smile, the kind a man makes in the dark when the dead are more loyal than the living. The financial papers were next. Bank statements, credit card bills, mortgage notices. I found luxury where hardship should have been. A $5,000 weekend in Napa, though Ava had told me they were visiting friends. A BMW lease under Leonard's name, though he had told me the dealer gave them a good deal. $800 a month for Leonard's golf club, which he rarely mentioned because he knew I had worn the same winter coat for 9 years. Designer purchases, restaurants, spa visits, online furniture orders, all threaded through with small transfers from the joint account where my pension had been landing. Not enough at once to trigger alarm, just small, steady bleeding. People imagine theft as a hand grabbing something. Real theft is often a straw placed quietly into another person's life. Ava's phone lay on the kitchen counter when I returned, charging beside her purse. I stood there looking at it for almost a full minute. There are lines a man hesitates to cross, even after others have crossed every line with him. Privacy had mattered to me once. Trust had mattered, but the papers in my shirt pocket had changed the rule. I knew her passcode because she entered it carelessly whenever she believed no one important was watching. Leonard's birthday. I typed it in. The phone opened. The messages were worse than the documents because documents lie coldly, but messages reveal appetite. Ava's sister had written, "Is the old man finally leaving after Thanksgiving?" Ava had answered, "Monday, thank God. I need my house back." In another thread, she wrote, "Leonard is being sentimental, but I can handle him. He always folds if I make him feel like a bad husband." In messages with Sunset Manor's admissions contact, she described me as verbally aggressive, suspicious, and prone to delusions about money. The admissions woman replied with polished sympathy. "Families struggle so much when seniors decline. We will support you through the transition." Transition, that beautiful word for being stolen from yourself. Then I found Rick. At first the messages were cautious, little jokes, late-night complaints. Ava telling him she felt trapped with a weak husband and his ancient father. Then they turned intimate, then explicit, then practical. Once Edward is placed, she wrote, "We will have cash flow again and I can breathe." Rick answered, "I still say you should make Leonard sell." Ava replied, "Not yet. Need him stable until I know what I can extract." Later she wrote, "After we get control of the pension, things will be easier. Leonard thinks it is for the house, poor baby. You and I deserve a real life." I read those words 3 times. Poor baby. That was my son. Weak, yes. Complicit, yes. But still my son, being used by the same woman who was using me. The knowledge did not soften what he had done, but it complicated the shape of my anger. Ava was not merely cruel. She was organized. She did not break people with outbursts. She moved their guilt, their shame, and their needs into position until they harmed themselves for her benefit. Leonard had always been vulnerable to stronger wills. I had raised him after his mother died by giving him everything I could and demanding too little in return. Perhaps I had mistaken gentleness for mercy. Perhaps I had left him untrained for predators. I took screenshots, sent them to myself, deleted the traces from her phone, set it back exactly where it had been, cable angled, screen down, purse beside it. When I finished, I stood in the kitchen with the coffee long cold on the table and realized I was calm. Not healed, not safe, calm in the way I had been calm when a furnace line ruptured at the mill, and everyone looked to me because panic would kill us faster than gas. I had a plan now, not complete but enough. Evidence, money, exit. Thanksgiving morning came cold and colorless. The sky pressed low over the house, rain misting the windows in a way that made the neighborhood look rubbed out. I rose before 6, dressed carefully, and put on the old blue sweater Martha used to like. It had a small, worn place at the cuff, but I chose it because I wanted one piece of her in the room. If I was going to sit across from my betrayers and feed them, I wanted Martha's memory near my skin. The turkey waited in the refrigerator, 20 pounds, bought with money from my pension and praised in advance by Ava as if she had done something by assigning me the work. I took it out, patted it dry, and began preparing Martha's stuffing. Celery, onion, sage, toasted bread, melted butter. A little apple because she said every good recipe needed one unexpected sweetness. My hands remembered the motions even as my mind worked through timing, files, phone calls, backups. By 8, the house smelled like Thanksgiving, which made the betrayal worse. There are scents the body trusts before the mind can object. Roasting turkey, coffee, butter warming in a pan, cinnamon, they suggest safety, continuity, childhood, marriage. Everyone gathered around a table pretending gratitude can be summoned by tradition. Leonard came down at 9, hair flattened on one side, robe tied loosely, eyes avoiding mine. He stopped in the doorway and inhaled. "Smells like Mom," he said. "Your mother believed food told the truth." I replied, peeling potatoes without looking up. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not died so quickly. "What does that mean?" "It means you can taste when something was made with care." He stood there longer than necessary. I could feel him wanting to say something, wanting me to behave normally, wanting the day to pass without consequence so Monday could come, and he could let Ava's plan carry him like a current. He poured coffee and spilled a little because his hand trembled. I watched the dark liquid spread across the white counter. He grabbed a towel too quickly. "Nervous, son." He looked at me sharply. "What?" I nodded toward the mug. "Coffee." "Oh, no. Just tired." I let him have the lie. There would be plenty of time for truth later. Ava came downstairs at 10:30 wearing a cream sweater, fitted dark pants, and pearl earrings too formal for a meal of 3 people. She had dressed for the version of Thanksgiving she wanted to remember. The one where she looked gracious while the old man cooked and the weak husband complied. She kissed Leonard on the cheek, touched my shoulder without asking, and said, "Edward, you have been busy." Her fingers rested on me for 1 second too long. Ava liked small possessions, a hand on a shoulder, a correction in front of others, a smile that told you she had already decided what your role was. I stepped half an inch away, just enough that her hand dropped. "I wanted everything done properly," I said. She blinked at the movement, then recovered. "Of course, it is probably good for you to stay active." There it was again, the kindness with a collar. I smiled. Activity keeps the mind sharp. For the first time all morning, her expression shifted. Not much, only the tightening around the eyes. She looked at Leonard, and Leonard looked into his coffee. Good, I thought. Let the pressure begin before the meal. The day moved slowly. Every ordinary domestic act stretched thin over the truth beneath. Ava arranged the table, then rearranged it, then moved the napkins half an inch and asked Leonard whether the candles looked balanced. Leonard said yes to everything. I basted the turkey, mashed the potatoes, warmed the rolls, checked the recorder hidden behind the decorative pillow in the living room, while pretending to adjust the throw blank, confirmed the laptop connection to the television from my bedroom, rechecked the evidence folder on the screen, audio, documents, screenshots, bank statements, my recorded statement, backups already sent to a lawyer, whose number Frank had given me at 7 that morning. I had not told Frank everything, only enough. He had listened in silence, then said, "Eddie, send me copies. If they touch you, I will be at that house before police finish their coffee." At 2, we sat down. The table looked beautiful. That was the sick thing. Ava had an eye for surfaces. White plates, silver napkin rings, candles, wine glasses. A centerpiece made of dried orange slices and eucalyptus. Martha would have set out mismatched serving bowls and laughed if the gravy spilled. Ava created a photograph. No one would want to live inside. Leonard carved the turkey, because Ava had said it looked more traditional if the man of the house carved. He hesitated when she said it, and I saw the phrase land between us. The man of the house, my house by labor, their house by assumption, Ava's house by performance. The turkey was good. The stuffing was better. The meal should have comforted me, but every bite felt like chewing through paper. Ava complimented the food, then spoke about maybe downsizing some of the holiday decorations next year because the attic was getting crowded. Leonard said we should think about safety upgrades for winter. Ava said yes, especially for Edward, because falls are so common at his age. She said it with her eyes on me, her fork moving neatly through cranberry sauce. I understood the message. We are still in control. We still know how to make your body into an argument. I placed my fork down. Your mother used to say Thanksgiving revealed people. Leonard swallowed. Revealed them how? By what they were grateful for, I said. Some people are grateful for family, some for shelter, some for the chance to do right before it is too late. Ava set her glass down with a soft click. That sounds ominous, Edward. Does it a little? Maybe age makes a man reflective. She smiled. Reflection is healthy. Obsession is not. I looked at her then, fully. I let the silence stretch until Leonard shifted in his chair. Ava held my gaze longer than most people would have. But I saw the irritation under her calm. She did not like resistance unless she had scripted it. Finally, she looked away, and that small surrender fed something cold inside me. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Ava insisted on coffee and pumpkin pie, though none of us wanted more food. Leonard sat beside her on the couch, his body angled slightly toward her like a plant bent toward artificial light. I sat in my chair, the one she had banished to the den and allowed back for the holiday because she wanted the room to look cozy. The television was black. The remote rested beside my hand. Rain ticked against the glass. In the low light, Martha's absence felt so large it seemed to occupy the fourth seat. I have been thinking a lot about memories, I said. Ava looked up from her pie. Memories, family memories, I said. The things people say when they think no one will hold them accountable. Leonard's cup paused near his mouth. Ava's eyes sharpened. Edward, what is this about? Truth, I said, and picked up the remote. The television came alive. My laptop screen appeared, larger than life. The folder labeled evidence centered in blue against the dark background. For a second, no one moved. The word sat there like an indictment. Leonard whispered, Dad. Ava's face remained composed, but the blood left her lips. I clicked the first file. Ava's voice filled the room. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the facility. I have already spoken to Sunset Manor. They have an opening next week. Leonard's coffee cup slipped from his hand. It struck the hardwood and shattered, coffee spreading like a dark wound beneath the table. He did not bend to clean it. Ava stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, not in confusion, but in the first animal recognition of danger. On the recording, Leonard asked about timing. Ava laughed. The room listened to itself commit betrayal. Turn it off, Ava said. No. Edward, turn it off now. I clicked nothing. I let the recording continue. Power of attorney, pension, social security, behavioral issues, clean break, no drama. Pack his things Monday morning. Sunset Manor, dementia, burdened. The word entered the room and seemed to remain there after the audio moved on. Leonard covered his face with both hands. Ava stood abruptly. This is illegal. I looked at her. Is it? You recorded a private conversation. A conversation in my home about stealing my money and confining me against my will. Your home, she snapped, then caught herself too late. I clicked the next file. Screenshots filled the screen, enlarged so even Leonard could not look away. Ava's messages to her sister, finally getting rid of the old man. Need my house back. Leonard is sentimental but manageable. Messages to Sunset Manor. He becomes suspicious and agitated when family discusses care. Medication may be necessary during transition. Messages to Rick. Once Edward is placed, cash flow improves. Poor Leonard thinks it is for the house. You and I deserve a real life. Leonard lowered his hands. His face had changed. Pain first, then humiliation, then something slower and deeper. The beginning of comprehension. Ava noticed it and moved fast. Those are taken out of context, she said. Leonard, look at me. This is what I warned you about. This is paranoia. He has been building some fantasy because he cannot accept that he needs help. I clicked the financial file. Bank statements, transfers, Napa, BMW lease, golf club, designer stores. My pension deposits highlighted beside their withdrawal. Ava stopped speaking. Leonard stared at the numbers as if they were written in another language. I clicked the final file. My own face appeared on screen. I had recorded the video at dawn, sitting in the same chair, wearing the same blue sweater. My voice sounded older than I expected, but clear. My name is Edward James Harlan, I said from the television. If this video is being viewed, it is because I have reason to believe my son Leonard Harlan and his wife Ava Harlan have attempted to place me in Sunset Manor under false claims of dementia, gain control of my pension and social security, and use forged or misleading documents to remove my ability to make decisions for myself. Ava made a sound I had never heard from her. Not a scream exactly, but a short broken gasp like a window cracking under pressure. She swayed once. Leonard reached toward her too late. She pitched forward from the couch and struck the floor, her cream sweater folding beneath her, one pearl earring coming loose and rolling under the coffee table. For a moment, Leonard simply stared at her, stunned by collapse, then dropped to his knees. Ava, wake up. Dad, help me. I did not move. She will wake up, I said. People like Ava do not faint from guilt. They faint from losing control. Leonard looked up at me, tears standing in his eyes. Dad, please. I looked at my son kneeling beside the woman who had almost helped him bury me alive. I felt the old father in me reach forward, wanting to comfort, wanting to fix, wanting to say it was not too late. Then I heard his recorded voice again asking when we tell him, not whether we should. I remained seated. Ava stirred after a minute, moaning softly, her hand going to her head. Leonard helped her upright. Her eyes focused slowly, then landed on me. The hatred in them was naked now. Without the performance, Ava looked smaller and more dangerous. Some people become less frightening when exposed. Ava became sharper, because exposure stripped away the social softness she had used as camouflage. You disgusting old man, she whispered. Leonard flinched. Ava. No, she said, shoving his hand away. No. He sat there spying on us, stealing my phone, recording private conversations, and now he wants to act like some victim. I stood then, slowly, because I wanted them to feel every inch of my age and every inch of my refusal to be shamed by it. You were going to have me declared incompetent by a doctor I never met. Because you are incompetent, she said. The room went silent. Even Leonard stopped breathing for a second. Say it again, I said. Ava pushed herself to her feet, unsteady but furious. You are an old, lonely, manipulative man who moved into our house and made everything about yourself. Your grief, your routines, your pills, your stories about the mill, your dead wife. Do you know what it is like living around someone who carries death into every room? Leonard whispered, stop. She did not stop. She had found the center of her cruelty, and now it poured out. I have spent 2 years smiling while you shuffled around this house like a ghost, expecting everyone to honor your sadness. Leonard and I are young. We have lives. We have a marriage. We deserve privacy. We deserve a chance to build something without you sitting in the corner, reminding everyone that life ends in cancer and warm milk. That hurt. I will not pretend it did not. My throat tightened so sharply, I nearly lost my voice. Martha's name, dragged through Ava's mouth like something dirty, entered me deeper than all the financial theft. For 1 second, I was back in hospice, holding Martha's hand as she apologized for the smell of medicine in the room. For 1 second, I nearly became the helpless man Ava wanted me to be. Then Leonard spoke, quietly. Ava, enough. She turned on him. Do not start. No, Leonard said. His voice shook, but the word held. You don't talk about Mom like that. Ava laughed once. Your mother has been dead for decades, Leonard, and she is still worth more than you will ever be, he said. The sentence stunned all three of us. Leonard most of all. He looked like a man who had stepped through a door and found himself somewhere unfamiliar. Ava stared at him with disbelief, then with calculation. She softened immediately. Baby, she said, listen to me. He is manipulating you. This is exactly what unstable people do. They divide families. They create drama. They make everyone feel guilty. I picked up the folder from the side table and placed it in front of Leonard. Closing documents. Read them. He looked down. Ava did not. I said, when I gave you the down payment, I made sure my ownership stake was recorded. 37% at closing, with the additional mortgage contributions taken from my pension. My attorney believes my equitable stake is now roughly 42%. Leonard turned a page, his face drained. Ava snatched the document from his hand. Impossible. You would know it was possible if you had read what you signed, I said. But you saw my money and assumed my trust made me stupid. She looked from the document to Leonard. Did you know about this? Leonard shook his head. I forgot. I mean, I remember Dad being at closing, but I thought. You thought what? Ava snapped. You thought he was just there to hand over money, like a useful old fool. The phrase hung there. Useful old fool. Leonard looked at her, and in that look I saw something break that should have broken years earlier. I said, here is what happens now. You have 30 days to buy out my share at fair market value, or the house goes into legal dispute. If either of you attempts to remove me, intimidate me, restrict my access to my accounts, contact Sunset Manor, or use forged medical documents again, the evidence goes not only to my attorney, but to the police and the state elder abuse investigator. Ava's face twisted. This is extortion. No, I said. Extortion is threatening someone for money. This is an old man refusing to be stolen from quietly. Leonard sank onto the couch. "Dad, I am sorry." I looked at him for a long time. "Are you sorry because you betrayed me? Or sorry because the betrayal failed?" He closed his eyes. "I don't know." That was the first honest thing he had said all day. It was not enough, but it was real. And real things had become rare in that house. The 30 days that followed were not a resolution. They were a siege. Ava did not leave immediately because predators rarely abandon a carcass until they are certain no meat remains. She moved through the house with brittle politeness, smiling when Leonard was present and hissing when he was not. She stood in doorways and watched me make coffee. She moved my medication bottles into a drawer and said she was decluttering. I moved them back. She unplugged the lamp beside my chair because it wasted electricity. I plugged it back in. She left brochures from senior communities on the kitchen counter, then claimed they came in the mail. I wrote the date on each one and placed it in my evidence folder. Once, while Leonard was at work, she leaned close enough that I could smell mint on her breath and said, "You think you won because you made one little presentation. But men your age die all the time from stress." I looked at her and said, "Then stop stressing me." Her smile disappeared. Leonard deteriorated under the pressure. Without Ava's certainty to lean on, he looked hollow. He tried apologizing in fragments, usually when Ava was upstairs or out of the room. "Dad, I never wanted you hurt. Dad, I thought maybe she knew more about care options. Dad, I was scared of losing my marriage." Each apology was true enough to be painful and insufficient enough to be useless. I did not comfort him. That was new for me. For 51 years, since the day he was born, my instinct had been to reduce his pain. Now I let him carry it. Some pain is not a wound. Some pain is weight training for a conscience. The banks refused them. I heard the calls through walls. Debt-to-income ratio, insufficient collateral, existing liabilities. Ava's voice moving from charm to irritation to cold fury. Leonard's voice shrinking. At night they fought in the bedroom. I heard my name: "Money ruined, your father, your weakness." Her voice cutting, his voice pleading. Their marriage, which had fed on convenience and denial, began to starve in the open air. On the 26th day, Leonard knocked on my door. He looked 10 years older. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red, and he smelled faintly of coffee and sleeplessness. "We cannot get the loan," he said. "I know. Ava wants to fight you. I know that too. I don't want to." I waited. He rubbed both hands over his face. "I have been thinking about what you asked me, whether I was sorry because I hurt you or because it failed. At first, I did not know. Then I hated you for asking. Then I hated myself because I realized why I hated." He sat down heavily in the chair by the window. "I let her make me into someone I don't recognize." "No," I said quietly. "She did not make you. She invited you. You accepted." The words struck him, but he did not argue. That was something. I showed him Ava's messages with Rick. Not all of them. Enough. He read in silence, and the remaining structure inside him seemed to fold inward. There was no dramatic outburst. He did not throw the phone or shout her name. He simply sat there staring at the screen while his face changed from shame to grief, to a cold, stunned humiliation. "She was going to leave me," he said. "Yes, after the money. Yes." He gave the phone back as if it burned. "What do I do?" "You start by telling the truth," I said. "To yourself first, then to her, then to a lawyer." He looked toward the door. "I am afraid." "I know. Aren't you going to tell me it will be all right?" "No." He nodded slowly. Maybe he understood then that I was no longer the father who turned every sharp edge away from him before it could teach him anything. Ava came home an hour later carrying shopping bags, because even collapse had not cured her appetite. Leonard and I met her in the kitchen. She saw us together and stopped. Her eyes moved from his face to mine, and for the first time since I had known her, she did not begin with performance. She began with suspicion. "What is this?" Leonard opened his laptop. "We need to talk about Rick." She went still. The bag slid slightly in her hand. I watched the fight that followed from a distance inside myself. Ava denied, then attacked, then cried, then confessed only what could no longer be denied, then blamed Leonard, then blamed me, then blamed loneliness, then money, then the house, then the suffocating obligation of living with an old man. Leonard stood through it. He shook. He cried once silently, but he stood. "I want you out," he said. Ava stared at him as if a chair had spoken. "You do not get to want anything without me." That was the marriage in one sentence. Leonard heard it too. I saw him hear it. "I am filing for divorce," he said. Ava's face hardened into something almost peaceful. "Fine, then drown with your father." She left 2 hours later with 3 suitcases, her pearl earrings, her expensive coat, and enough rage to poison any room she entered. Before she walked out, she turned to me and said, "You will die alone, Edward. Men like you always do. You mistake being stubborn for being love." I said nothing. There are curses you do not answer, because answering gives them a chair. 6 months later, I was living with Frank in his old 4-bedroom house on Miller Road. That sounds like peace when written plainly, but peace is not the right word. Peace suggests something whole. I was not whole. I was functional. There is a difference. Frank and I had routines. Coffee at 7, grocery shopping on Wednesdays, poker with the old mill boys on Fridays. Sometimes we sat on the back porch at dusk with beer sweating in our hands, and said very little because men who have lost wives and survived sons do not need to fill every silence. Leonard divorced Ava. She fought until the evidence made fighting expensive. Rick disappeared. She moved in with her sister 2 states over and posted things online about narcissistic families and financial abuse. Leonard worked 2 jobs, paid down debt, and mailed me $500 every month even after I told him not to. I deposited each check into an account I did not touch. Maybe one day I would return it. Maybe I would not. Some debts need to exist in order to remind a man who he became and who he is trying not to be. Leonard called often. At first I let most calls go to voicemail. Then I answered once a week. Then twice. He told me about counseling, about work, about learning to cook simple meals, about how quiet the house was after Ava left. He told me he had met a nurse named Sarah, a widow with 2 children, and that he was taking things slowly. I listened. I did not give advice unless he asked directly. Fatherhood after betrayal becomes a colder craft. You still love, but you stop confusing love with rescue. One evening in late spring, Frank asked if I was happy. We were on the porch, the sky bruised purple over the trees, the air smelling like cut grass and rain. I did not answer quickly, because happiness had become a word from another life. I thought about Martha. I thought about the guest room. I thought about Ava's voice saying, "Burden, old man, clean break." I thought about Leonard kneeling beside her on Thanksgiving, asking me to help the woman who had planned my erasure. I thought about the way freedom had arrived not as joy, but as the absence of people deciding my life in rooms where I was not present. "I am alive," I said. Frank nodded as if that was an answer. Months later, Leonard called and asked for my blessing to marry Sarah. His voice trembled. He sounded young again, and old, and humbled in ways that might become wisdom if he did not run from them. I asked him about her. He said she worked hard, paid her own bills, raised her children with patience, and did not want a man to save her. He said she knew what he had done to me. He had told her everything. That mattered, not enough to erase the past, enough to mark a different road. "You have my blessing," I said finally, "but not because you earned your way back, because a blessing is not a receipt. It is a hope." He cried then. I let him. After the call, I sat alone for a long time while Frank washed dishes inside. The old Edward, the one who believed family was proven by sacrifice, would have called that moment healing. He would have said we had come through the fire and found each other again. I do not say that now. Fire does not return wood to what it was. It leaves charcoal. It leaves smoke in the grain. Leonard may become a good man. He may love Sarah well. He may spend the rest of his life trying to repay what cannot be repaid. Ava may keep moving from one target to another, calling herself misunderstood, until age finally teaches her that beauty and cruelty both lose market value. Frank and I may sit on that porch until one of us is gone, and the other has to learn silence all over again. As for me, I survived, but survival is not the same as restoration. I still warm milk at night sometimes, though I no longer add honey because honey was Martha's hand, Martha's measure, Martha's small act of tenderness, and without her it tastes like pretending. I keep my documents in a locked box. I keep my bank account separate. I read everything before I sign. When someone says family takes care of family, I no longer feel comfort first. I feel the old hallway under my slippers, the rain against the windows, Ava's voice in the living room saying after Thanksgiving he goes straight to the facility. That sentence lives in me now. It did not kill me, but it changed the architecture. People think betrayal ends when the guilty are exposed. It does not. Exposure is only light entering a ruined house. You still have to walk through the rooms afterward and decide what can be saved, what must be boarded up, and what you will never enter again. I got my dignity back, or some version of it. I got my money secured, my name protected. My future moved out of Ava's reach. I got Leonard's apology, his effort, his slow and painful return toward decency. But I did not get back the man who stood in that hallway believing his son would never let anyone harm him. That man is gone. He was packed up before Sunset Manor ever had the chance, folded into a silence no facility could hold. And whatever I am now is what remained after I opened the door, pressed play, and watched the truth do what love had failed to do. So if you ask whether I won, I can only say this. Ava fainted. Leonard broke. The house was sold out from under the fantasy they had built. I moved into a life no one else controls. But every Thanksgiving, when the weather turns gray and kitchens begin to smell like butter and sage, I feel the floor of that hallway beneath my feet again. And I remember that sometimes the people closest to you do not need to raise a hand to bury you. Sometimes all they need is a plan, a form, a signature, a facility with an opening next week, and the certainty that you are too old, too grateful, or too broken to fight back. They were wrong about that, but being right did not make me whole. It only kept me from disappearing.